Every year in the Mallee we get fires start either from natural events like lightning or often from machinery and all those activities connected to grain harvest.
Harvest fires have been a persistent problem around the country as farmers work on through the summer heat.
So you imagine hot machinery on a warm day in the Mallee operating in a field or a paddock of many hundred hectares. You get a fire start in that sort of environment and it can be pretty challenging.
12 months ago there was a fire down south of Tuddy that was lit from a bearing on a header comb, and by the time we got there it had a fair head up. Luckily it was not far from the Linga Air Base, and they heard me talking on the radio about the fire and they went out and had a look in our direction, put the planes up, and if they hadn't been there it would have got into the desert then.
Being such a vast area in the northwest of Victoria, which is largely unpopulated, the idea of the fire spotter is you can get over that country relatively quickly and we can track lightning strikes. If it's out in the grassland, cover a massive area and in a short period of time. I recently was at a fire in South Australia where there's 16,000 hectares which burnt in 6 hours. It gets quite scary when it's travelling that fast and that big. It's almost uncontrollable.
Since we've started using planes now, they save us so much time. Without the planes we'd be lost.
Aerial firefighting resources are really important to us up here in the Mallee, because one of our greatest hindrances, I suppose, is time and distance, where we're probably one of the most vast and least populated areas in Victoria. So with that, aircraft allow us to get some eyes over the fire very quickly. We can get intelligence back and then we know where we need to allocate resources. And also when we talk about air attack capability, often if that's a helitack, so a water bombing helicopter or a fixed wing aircraft that has a bombing capacity, it allows them to drop a couple of loads of water on the head of the fire really quickly. Often can't completely extinguish it, but it allows that fire to be slowed and give the ground resources a chance to catch up, get on scene and then go to work and completely extinguish the fire. So whether it's a air observing platform or it's a firefighting aircraft, both are really vital to what we do.
From a Mallee perspective, we rely on aircraft for early detection and first attack. So you think about the broader landmass across the Mallee area, it's very remote and not densely populated. So aircraft are really critical in detecting fires and suppressing them straight up. Our first attack strategy is to generally go out with the air attack platform and 2 bombers, and we'll try and do what's called a V. So one bomber will lay on one flank of the fire, its load, and then the other bomber will come in and lay on the other flank and try and nip off the head of the fire.
Bomber pilots take on a different role. They're going through the head of the fire and often ducking under the smoke plumes in trying to put product on the head of a fire. It can be very dangerous, especially flying around in smoke at low levels with multitudes of other aeroplanes around. So it's very important that you stay to a system and work a system so that everybody's kept safe in that environment.
The majority of the big bushfires are started by lightning, and that can not only be a single ignition, it could be multiple ignitions. My worst day in the sky was back in 2014, and we detected 16 fires in one afternoon, and that led to our big event here in the Mallee, which was the 2014 complex, which had 6 fires all up. So you think 16 ignitions joined up and created 6 major fires, and that burnt, I think, in excess of 112,000 hectares. When we're attacking the bigger fires, you've got this big column of smoke, and quite often it'll look like it's got a thundercloud on top. So it's established a big convection column. It's making its own weather. You don't want to be flying through smoke at all, particularly not in a fixed wing. In a helicopter, you can fly through some, but you've got to maintain visual through the other side of that smoke. So it's very dynamic and it changes from one minute to the next. What you thought might have been clear air around the fire all of a sudden becomes smoky and blocked out. So on those fires, you are just busy all the time, just trying to do what you can with the helicopters and bombers. And quite often what you'll do is you'll probably leave the fire front itself, because your bombing will be ineffective against something so big. And what we focus on then is the spot fires ahead of the main fire. It is rough, it is hot, and it's just a high stress environment, and you're getting knocked around by the turbulence, and also the aircraft can sometimes get pulled towards the main fire. So with that fire making its own weather, you're always thinking about safety. Part of the job as an air attack supervisor is making that call that we've got to call off all bombing activities, because it's just simply too dangerous for us to be in the sky.
The greatest asset we can protect is a human life. So the role we play then is, if there's people's lives at risk, then we would take whatever steps it was to protect those people's lives.
Fighting wildfires requires a combined human effort, and yes, today we do that with modern fire trucks and we do it with aircraft, but that same ethos, if you like, is what was around 100, 150 years ago, where people would band together. We know that no one individual can put a wildfire out. It requires a cooperative effort. So now we combine the vast resources of our CFA volunteers, the equipment that CFA has, linked in with firefighting aircraft, source and technical skill that's within the personnel in Forest Fire Management Victoria. It's that combined effort, when that all comes together in a really cohesive way, and I think up here in the Mallee we do it particularly well. When we pull that together, we get a great outcome.
The pilots are really excellent. They fly over low once we know where they're going, and hopefully I get everyone out the road. And we've never had a problem yet. Just this year was another lightning strike, and the plane he'd been up flying the Sunset Desert looking for fires, and he's seen this one come up. And when we got there, it was so dirty. It's the dirtiest fire I've ever been to. You couldn't see here to the road. You couldn't see 20 metres in front of you, because it turned out there was 80 km/h winds on the ground, and it was just whipping the dust up. And if it hadn't been for the plane and the spotter, he directed me to where all the fires were all the time. Then I directed ground crew, and without him the fire would have burnt for ages. But we were just really fortunate they were flying there, so they didn't have bombers, so it was just the platform, and that was excellent.
The air attack supervisor's role is to ensure the safe and efficient coordination of aircraft over a fireground, and that means constant contact with ground crew. In terms of a working environment, it can be quite stressful, because you're monitoring sometimes up to 5 radios in the aircraft at the time. You're part of an air crew, so you're responsible with the pilot for the aircraft's safe operation. And more often than not, we're flying in conditions that aren't the best, and particularly around fires. So it's quite rough and quite hot. So it's not a glamorous job by any means, or a work environment. It can be quite stressful, and it also requires a real in-depth understanding of fire behaviour.
In my role, yes, I can call in an air attack platform if I go through CFA duty officer, whoever's in charge. If I need them, I can call them. But because we get on so good with Nathan and them, lots of times he comes without me calling him, and it's really handy.
When we're talking to the ground crew, we're doing a joint strategy on how we're going to attack that fire, and then we select targets for the bombers. So we're always thinking about, first and foremost up in the air, about the ground crew safety. So we make sure that they're out of the bombing zone, and also that the ground crews, they're making sure that there's public out of those areas as well.
Our biggest problem is the distance factor here. We can have a 1,000-acre fire and think that that's a small fire, because by the time we get there, like for instance a fire out there where I said it was so dirty, that's 40 kilometres from here. Well, the fire truck can't get there in 5 minutes, and it had already burnt 200 hectares before we got there. So it gives you a bit of an idea how much we appreciate it when we hear the plane coming. It's just made firefighting a lot easier.